Okay. Bună ziua. Unfortunately, my spoken Romanian is not very well developed, although I understand Romanian. So I apologize if it will be in foreign language, in English. In any case, if you have any question, feel free to ask in Romanian, and I should be able, hopefully, to answer. So before starting the presentation, just a couple of words about me. So I'm a senior manager from Accenture Technology Consulting. I've been with Accenture 12 years. The last 2.5 based here in Bucharest, Romania. And I'm responsible here for all our technology services. But my main area of specialization is actually IT security, where I've been working in this area for the last 10 years. Okay, so for today's presentation, I wanted to talk about the general concept of data protection and privacy, considering that this is, I would say, in the last few years has increased a lot in terms of relevance in our work, and with a brief case study focused on data loss prevention, which, if you like, is a particular areas within the broader data protection and privacy. So briefly on the agenda, I will go through 3 main points. First, on data protection challenges, just to have an overview of what are the typical challenges facing different type of companies. Then some information about overall data protection framework, and then a little more information about data loss prevention. Okay, so starting from, let's say, what are the broad range of data that typically need to be protected, especially in terms of confidentiality, so to prevent disclosure to unauthorized users. Here are some categories. I'm sure that any of you working on companies will recognize a number of these challenges. Some of them are common. For instance, regarding any private data for employees, any company typically has to do it. So when we look into, for instance, the sensitive personal data, but then also, of course, protecting the information from own customers. There are high requirements. Then there is something more specialized on healthcare, and this is not only for healthcare providers, but can be also for private companies, and so on. Of course, intellectual property, and I have to say, to be fair, that while in this area there is a lot of regulation and pressure that progressively more and more companies are paying attention to this, I have to say also from my experience with many different clients, sometimes there is not sufficient attention towards this area in terms of, first of all, classification and then protection. So, again, this is varying from trade secrets, source code, strategy documents, and so on. And then finally some company confidentials data, like unreleased financial data before press releases. These are highly confidential, or there are problems also of insider trading and so on. So, as I said, this does not mean to be exhaustive, but just to say that the challenges are quite broad. I will not enter into all these details, but you can take examples of a lot of issues which went to the press, and typically this is just, let's say, the edge of the iceberg, because many more incidents go undetected. For instance, when there is about stealing trade secrets, you will not maybe realize, but then there will be competitors taking advantage of that. So these are just examples of typical incidents and statistics, and the way that data can be, let's say, leaked or lost. So it could be intentional or accidentally forwarding emails. Sometimes this is done outside the company, and it's too late, to stop it. Data misuse by employees leaving the company. We talked about the trade secrets. You could take, the list of customers and go into the competition. Theft or loss of CDs. Data files copied by insiders, or and so on. So there are several examples. So you can see here some example of statistics about the number of messages containing confidential data, how many companies lost data from USB, and so on. Now, this is the general issue. Now, here I just try to list an example of the fact, okay, the problem is big, but also it's difficult to address it for a number of reasons. So, first of all, increasing complexity of operations, complex architectures. Also, when you start to have a service-oriented architecture, you do not even know exactly sometimes where certain processes perform and where the data are actually transferred. We talked already about the wide range of sensitive data. Sometimes you might be very focused on one category, maybe customer data, but you might miss other important ones. Many types of information channels that need to be protected on the endpoint, on the network, and so on. Growing volumes of data on portable media. Now it's possible to store very quickly large amount of data, while before at least you were maybe forced to print. Okay, so also the data can be transferred very quickly. The other issue is the distinction between structured and unstructured data. So very traditional security was applied to structured data, like databases, for instance, where you can have tight access control, you can have security monitoring and audit. But then once the data is exported, maybe on a file, then you really miss the control. This can go basically to everybody. Regulatory impact and market pressure on companies. It's true that due to a number of incidents around the globe, regulatory compliance has become bigger in terms of burden, and this is putting additional pressure on the companies. The problem is, again, sometimes you might cross networks and borders where there is different regulation. So this is one of the typical reasons why outsourcing offshore outside, for instance, the European Union, a lot of companies say, yeah, there is an advantage from maybe the business perspective, but there are a lot of security challenges. The decrease in effectiveness of traditional security perimeter. Again, traditional security was sufficient to have a very strong perimeter with firewalls and access policies, and then you consider that everything inside was secure, but now more and more there is access through external devices, third parties, VPN, so it's not sufficient to have protection only at the perimeter level. Increase, of course, sophisticated attacks from the cybercrime, limited resources typically also within the company from the technical, procedural, organizational point of view in terms of people to react, and so on. We'll talk also about the overall life cycle of the data, which is an additional challenge. So the problem is not only to consider, okay, how can I protect the data when they are initially created, but it's through the overall life cycle. I will not go through all these questions, but some of them are definitely relevant. So from the beginning data are created, somebody should take care to classify them. And to be honest, the majority of the company do not do this, or maybe they do it exceptionally for specific type of data. And typically you need to have policy where not only you define how to classify the data, but also what type of protection you should have depending on the level of classification. And you need to define data owner, also retention period. Now, very often we only think about the confidentiality of the data, but there are also some important regulation about the retention. I don't know exactly, I remember for Romania, but for instance, banks have mandated the number of years that they have to keep, financial records. Could be 5 years, 7 years. And this is different for different category of data. I don't know, if you do not retain your audit logs for a sufficient amount of time, in case of an incident, you're not able to go back to understand what really happened. Okay, then there is overall the maintenance, who can actually modify the data, where they are stored, the distribution, of course. For instance, interesting is, can I revoke access after distribution? This is quite challenging. There are certain categories of technologies, including enterprise rights management or digital rights management, that can really help you enforce such policies. But first you need to define the policy and then define how to implement it. Okay, we already talked a little bit about the retention and archiving, and then the destruction.